Hello, Arden Church. This is Pastor Jamie. We're continuing in our study of the book of Romans. I'm asking you to read through 2 chapters each week in the book of Romans. Last week I asked you to read chapters 9 and 10. And so please read 9 and 10. Please read 11 and 12 for next week. But this week we're going to think about 9 and 10. So turn to chapter 10 of Romans. We're going to look at the first part of chapter 10. So the Apostle Paul is writing to Christians in Rome before he gets there, and we're just going to jump into the middle. Verse 9, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So here the Apostle Paul is lifting up your choice, my choice, that you have to make, that I have to make, in becoming a follower of Jesus. It's not just confessing with your mouth. It's also being sincere. It's believing in your heart. And that doesn't mean you can't have doubts, but it does mean you're sincere. And then down in verse 13, he kind of repeats it. He says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And he's quoting from the Old Testament prophet Joel. But again, it just lifts up the personal responsibility that God comes to us before we come to him. That in the imagery of Revelation 3:20, Jesus knocks on the door. You thought that was your door, right? That Jesus knocks on the door of your heart, and then he says, if anyone opens the door. And here the imagery is, if everyone calls on the name of the Lord, that God always answers and will rescue. And then this is what I wanted to focus on today, verse 14. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? Again, a series of questions. And how can they believe in one of whom they have not heard? So again, these are questions that are rhetorical. How can they call on the one that they've not believed in? Well, you can't. And how can they believe in the one if they've never heard the name of Jesus, never heard the gospel? Well, they can't. And then again in verse 14, and how can they hear without someone preaching to them? They can't. And how can they preach unless they're sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. So Paul is saying what Jesus said in the Great Commission in Matthew 28. Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations. That we are called to go. That doesn't necessarily mean go to another part of the world, or go to another part of the country, or go to another part of the city, but it's go to where you currently are not. It might be to go to your neighbor. It might be to go to your family. It might be to go and talk with your hairdresser. It might be to go and talk to parents of kids that you know, or it might be to go to talk to friends, people you play cards with or tennis with, or something like that. And we're to go and preach the good news. Of course, we're all not preachers, but we're to go and communicate the good news, sometimes through words, sometimes through actions, but certainly sometimes through both. But we are to go and preach the good news. So do you have the sense of being called? Do you have the sense of being called by God to be an ambassador for God? What motivates us to do this? I love what the Apostle Paul said in the beginning of this chapter. Look at verse 1 of chapter 10. Brothers and sisters, my heart's desire and prayer to God for the Israelites is that they may be saved. Paul has this passion born out of compassion for people to know Jesus. I talked to the Grow team about this yesterday, but why do we want Arden Church to grow? Why do we want Arden Church to grow? Just to survive? That's not very inspiring. Let's grow so we can survive. Let's hope that some really wealthy people come so they can give their money so we can fix our roof and survive. Now, fixing our roof and surviving are critically important, but that can't be our motive. That can't be what keeps us up at night. That can't be what excites us. Paul says this in Romans 10, my heart's desire What is our heart's desire? And Paul says that the Israelites, that they may be saved. Now our language, my language isn't I want to see people saved. My language is I want people to know Jesus. I want people to come to an understanding of who they are and who God is and how God has rescued us and saved us from our sin and ourselves. I want people to know Jesus. Is that your heart's desire? Turn back a page to Romans 9, chapter 2. You can sense his desire again. I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. Why? Verse 3, for I could wish that I myself were cursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my brothers and sisters, those of my own race, the people of Israel. You know, he has sorrow and unceasing anguish in his heart because his brothers and sisters, his Jewish brothers and sisters, don't know the hope of God. Paul writes in Galatians, he says, I ache as in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. That's in Galatians 4:19 if you want to look it up later. He says, I ache. He says, I ache. Do we ache for people to come to know Jesus? Is it our heart's desire? Do we have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in our hearts? And the answer is probably no. No. We care so often about our own needs over the needs of others. But I'm telling you, and I'm saying this to myself, it's important to have goals and strategies. It's important to have a purpose statement. It's important to want the desire to go, but the motive, oh God, the motive must be that we want to see people come to faith in Jesus. That's to be our heart's desire. That's to be our ache, our longing. And out of that sense of longing, of purpose, of intensity, will come strategies and plans and vision. So, my friends, read Romans 11 and 12 for next time. And I look forward to being with you next week. Have a good day and a good week.